"You're sure she's out?" That was Stephanie's voice, low and smug somewhere behind the curtain. I blinked against the fluorescent light overhead. My chest still ached from the surgery and every breath rattled like dry leaves. But I was awake. "She's out," she repeated. "We sign Thursday." I couldn't move, not much. But my ears worked fine. The monitor beside me beeped faster. Evan paced by the door, nervous maybe, or just pretending to be. Stephanie sat in the chair beside him, her phone aimed at her lap, probably recording one of those whispery vlogs she thought made her look soulful. 3 days of freedom from the farm, she said, like it was a prison sentence. I swear once we're out, I'm never smelling corn dust again. I focused on my breath, slow, controlled. She didn't know I could hear her. She didn't know I wasn't out. The door creaked as they slipped out. The nurse checked my vitals a few minutes later and asked if I needed anything. I didn't answer. Not yet. They thought the land was theirs to touch, to flip, to upgrade. But they forgot who signed the papers, who paid the taxes, who built the damn rose with her own hands before Stephanie ever touched a designer bag. I'd let them think I was weak a little longer. Let them whisper. Let them plan. Because what they didn't know, what they'd never bothered to ask, was that the land wasn't all they were messing with. They were digging up more than dirt. They were getting close to something I hadn't even told Evan about. I closed my eyes again, not to sleep, to prepare. Because by Thursday, when Stephanie put on her lipstick and smiled over that dotted line, I'd be there. And I wouldn't be the one signing anything. They wheeled me out of the hospital just after 7. Evan held the door open, said all the right things. "Take it slow. Mom call. If you need anything, we'll check in soon." But he didn't come inside, just placed my bag on the porch and told me to rest. Then the car pulled away, tires crunching gravel, and the quiet settled back in like it never left. I let myself in. The air inside the house was still and familiar. The same old draft under the front window, the same creak in the hallway floor. No one had touched anything. I could tell. The curtains still pulled unevenly. My cup still on the drying rack. The coat I wore before surgery still hanging by the door. I walked slower than I used to. The steps to the kitchen took more effort, but the ache in my legs was nothing compared to what sat waiting on the table. One of Robert's ledgers, open but not read. Next to it, an envelope from a realtor I didn't recognize. Addressed to Evan. Thick with printed pages. I didn't open it. I didn't have to. I sat down at the table and placed my hand over Robert's last notes. Soy rotation barn repair costs. Waterline measurements. His handwriting always too small, but careful. I traced the line where the ink stopped. He always said the land would protect us as long as we protected it. After a moment, I stood up and went to the back office. The safe opened with its usual tug. Inside the binder with our business accounts. I flipped to the most recent statement. The number sat there steady as ever. 7 figures. All mine. They hadn't even looked. In the kitchen, the light shifted. Afternoon sun catching the corners of dust. I moved to the front window and looked out over the land bare fields, waiting for frost. The same barn Stephanie called an eyesore. She said this place was holding them back, but I wasn't done holding on. The receptionist didn't know what to do with me. She blinked at the sight of my wheelchair. The folder in my lap, the way I rolled past her without waiting for an announcement. I found them in the back conference room. Stephanie was laughing, head-tilted nails, polished her voice too loud for a place like that. Evan sat beside her, uncomfortable in a blazer he didn't know how to wear. They didn't notice me at first. Not until the notary stood up and said, "We're just waiting on the co-owner." Stephanie turned like someone had slapped her. Evan stood up too fast. "Mom? What are you doing here? We thought you were resting." "I was," I said, placing the folder on the table. "Now I'm here." The deed slid out clean. I opened it slowly, like setting down a meal someone didn't deserve, but was going to be served anyway. Stephanie's eyes darted across the page. This land requires 2 signatures, I said calmly. Mine hasn't moved. The attorney glanced between us, unsure whether to speak. The notary looked ready to pack up. I thought Evan started, but the words collapsed halfway out. I didn't need an apology. Not there. Not then. I looked once at Stephanie. Her mouth was tight, the smile long gone. She reached for her coffee and found it cold. I left the papers on the table, turned my chair, and rolled out without another word. The door made a soft click behind me. Outside, the wind had picked up. They would need time to recover from that room, but I knew they wouldn't give up. People who want something for nothing never stop at no. I left the attorney's office without looking back. The farm was still. The fields lay quiet under the sharp autumn sky, and the front door creaked the way it always did. I hung my coat, washed my hands, and made tea without rush. Then I walked to the back room and unlocked the cabinet. The file I wanted sat in the middle Kendry Rural Holdings, LLC. I pulled it down and opened the second folder from the left. It was all there. In 2020, I'd purchased the debt on a modest property in Granger, Iowa. 2-bedroom, 1.5-bath fenced yard. A safe place for aging parents trying to hold on. The mortgage had been sold twice before it came to me. Owner names David and Corinne Leeds, Stephanie's parents. She'd once bragged about Napa vineyards and private schooling, called our farm a dusty inheritance no one asked for. But the truth was humbler. The vineyard had folded during the crash, and they'd been clinging to that house ever since. I never told anyone I bought the mortgage. Didn't need to. They made their payments modest but steady. I left the interest low, the terms long. It wasn't charity. It was a choice. 3 years now, every payment deposited into the Kendry account. Every check signed by the same neat handwriting, Corinne's. They were good people, I believed that. But good people don't always raise kind children. I closed the file slowly, pressing down the edges like I always do. The paper felt heavier than before. Stephanie thought she could corner me with a smile and a pen. But she hadn't bothered to ask what I held in reserve. Not just land. Not just money. I held the foundation beneath her story, the part she never talked about in her videos. And I wasn't done writing my part. Evan showed up on Sunday morning without warning. I heard his truck before I saw him, too new, too shiny for our dirt drive. He walked up the steps, slow eyes scanning everything like it was a stranger's place. The porch boards creaked, same as always. I opened the screen door before he could knock. "Thought I'd check on you," he said. "Come in," I answered. We sat in the kitchen. I poured coffee into the same chipped mugs we'd used since he was 10. He didn't touch his. "This place," he said, eyes drifting to the window. "It's held up, I guess." "It's held us," I said. He nodded, but only halfway. "You ever think about updating it? Paving the driveway, fixing the porch? Maybe starting fresh?" I let the question sit for a while. Watched the steam curl off his cup. "Evan," I said quietly, "have you ever gone hungry in this house?" He shook his head. "Ever had the bank call about a missed payment? No? Ever gone to school without shoes that fit?" He didn't answer. Just stared at the table like it had changed since his last visit. I reached into the drawer beside me and pulled out the envelope, slid it across the table. He opened it slow, read the balance, then read it again. $826,000, he said, voice tight. "In the operating account," I replied. "After payroll taxes and next season's seed." He leaned back, his jaw tensed. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you never asked," I said. The kitchen was quiet, except for the tick of the old clock over the sink. He looked smaller somehow. Not childish, but unsure. "I thought you were struggling." "No," I said. Just quiet. He picked up the mug and took a sip. The coffee had gone cold, but he drank it anyway, outside, The wind picked up through the open window, and I watched him shift in his seat. He was starting to understand, but he wasn't done choosing sides. The invitation came folded in polite words. David and Corinne wanted to have me for dinner. Just a simple meal, they said. We haven't seen you since your procedure. I knew what it was. Guilt with a side of curiosity. Their house in Granger looked the same as it had in the mortgage file white siding in need of paint, a porch swing that sagged slightly on one side. I brought a pie I didn't bake and a bottle of wine I didn't plan to open. Inside the table was set for 4. Appetizers came from boxes, pastry bites, spinach, something. Corinne smoothed her blouse and smiled too much. David tried to joke, but the nerves came through. They talked about Stephanie's new brand deals, her rural authenticity. David chuckled as if the word meant something warm. Corinne nodded, eyes bright. She's built quite a following, David said. Nearly 130,000 now. A real businesswoman. I smiled and took a sip of water. Halfway through the meal, Stephanie burst in with a phone already in hand. Sorry. Filming ran late, she said. Adjusting her blouse in the hall mirror. Mom, make sure the lights aren't too yellow. My audience hates that. She joined the table without asking what we were eating, so she grinned, panning the phone across the table. Maybe we'll turn that dusty old barn into a content studio. Light it just right, hang some vintage tools for the vibe. Poor chic is trending. Corinne laughed too quickly. David said nothing. Stephanie turned off her phone, but not her performance. Anyway, she said, spearing her dessert, don't die too soon, Marla. We haven't sold the farm yet. I looked at her and smiled. Some deeds, I said, come with surprises. David glanced up, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. Stephanie kept talking. Corinne served the pie. I folded my napkin neatly beside the untouched plate and stood. Thank you for dinner. They all smiled, not quite knowing what they'd served. I walked out into the quiet evening. They still didn't see it, but soon they would. The gala hall shimmered with effort. Faux crystal chandeliers, white linen, a string quartet by the punch bowl. Our town tried hard when it wanted to be impressive. Stephanie arrived in a champagne-colored gown, posing against the event backdrop with one hand on her hip, the other holding a borrowed clutch. Rural reform looks like this, her caption read. Evan walked 2 steps behind, awkward, in a fitted jacket, his tie already loosened. I arrived quietly. Black dress, flat shoes, hair pulled back. No entourage. I nodded to the staff and took my seat near the back. My name wasn't on the guest list, but my foundation's check had cleared weeks ago. The program began with handshakes and plaques. Small charities received big applause. Then the host stepped forward with a smile, and now she said into the mic, we recognize this year's largest single donor, an anonymous contribution from the Kendry Rural Foundation. Stephanie turned to Evan, frowning. She whispered something behind her hand. I stood. A few people turned. Then more. I didn't walk fast. Just steady toward the microphone. I unfolded the note I'd brought in my purse. Good evening, I said. I won't take long. I listed the grants by name, the Agricultural Youth Program Stephanie once mocked online, the community garden David had run for 2 years, the Rural Literacy Center where Corinne taught part-time, the health fund that quietly covered her recent surgery. The Kendry Rural Foundation, I said, exists to preserve and invest in communities that others overlook. I didn't say Stephanie's name. I didn't need to. I ended with one line. Sometimes help arrives before the headline. Then I folded my note and returned to my seat. Stephanie sat frozen. Evan looked down at his hands. Applause came not loud, not showy, but respectful. From the side of the room, a board member I'd worked with for years gave a small nod. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. Let them think. Let them sit in what they'd built. Tomorrow, The real harvest would begin. The phone rang just after sunrise. I almost didn't answer. The display read, "Corinne Leeds." I picked it up on the third ring. Her voice was thin, shaking. Marla, the mortgage company, called. They said the renewal's under review. Something about new ownership records. I let her speak. She kept apologizing, though she didn't know for what. We've never missed a payment. You know that. I don't understand what's happening. I know, I said softly. Just wait for the letter. It'll explain. When I hung up, the kitchen was still. The coffee machine sputtered to life behind me. Outside, frost edged the porch rail. By mid-morning, I saw Evan's truck pull up the drive. He didn't come inside right away. From the window, I watched him stand on the porch talking to someone sitting on the steps. Stephanie. She looked smaller than usual, wrapped in one of his old jackets. The phone in her hand was buzzing over and over. She kept staring at the screen like it was a wound she couldn't stop touching. Evan came in alone first. "What did you do?" he asked. "Tell me what you mean." "Stephanie's sponsors are dropping her. Some video's been passed around from the gala. Everyone's talking." "I didn't send it," I said. "I didn't need to. People heard what they were meant to hear." He looked at me a long time before stepping aside. Stephanie entered next, her eyes red but hard. "You're ruining us," she said, voice trembling under the surface. "No," I said, setting my cup down. "I'm revealing you." The room fell quiet. Evan shifted, waiting for something apology explosion, maybe both. None came. Stephanie stood there for a moment, breathing fast. Then she turned and left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Evan didn't follow her. He sat down at the table instead, head in his hands. He didn't say another word. But in that silence, I knew the ground had started to shift, and it wasn't done moving yet. He came back 3 days later. No truck noise this time, no heavy footsteps on the porch. Just the sound of boots crunching through dry leaves. I was stacking feed in the barn, slow and steady, when I saw him standing in the doorway. He didn't speak right away. Just watched the rhythm of my work, the lift, the turn, the thud. "She says I should choose," he said finally. I didn't stop. "And what do you think?" He took a breath like the words cost him something. I think I didn't see how far we'd drifted. I set the last sack down and brushed the dust from my hands. "You saw what you wanted to see." He nodded. "Yeah, I did." We walked outside together and sat on the edge of the trough. The air carried the faint bite of coming frost. Neither of us spoke for a long while. When he finally did, his voice was quieter. "She's staying with her parents for now. Says she needs space. Says I need time to grow up." I didn't answer. Sometimes silence teaches better than words. He kicked at the gravel with his boot. I kept telling myself she just didn't understand. But she did. She just didn't care. The afternoon sun caught on the barn roof and he turned toward me. "I'd like to help with the fall prep," he said. I walked to the tool rack, took down a spare pair of gloves, and handed them to him. He slipped them on, tested the fit, and started stacking beside me like he'd been doing it all his life. We worked until the light shifted gold and the first chill settled in. No speeches, no apologies. Just the sound of feed bags falling into place one after another. When we finished, he looked out across the fields, hands resting on his knees. "I forgot how good this feels," he said. "Hard work usually does," I told him. He nodded. Once, then followed me back toward the house where the last part of the harvest was waiting. The leaves turned. The fields quieted. Life settled back into its old rhythm, though not quite the same. Stephanie moved in with her sister across town. I heard bits and pieces from Evan, but mostly her absence spoke louder than her presence ever did. The selfies stopped. The speeches about breaking cycles faded. Her feeds went quiet. I repaired the porch one plank at a time. Evan patched the fencing along the east side, muttering about mending more than wood. We didn't say much while we worked. We didn't have to. The land didn't ask for commentary. It just expected care. We cooked again in the same kitchen she'd once called a museum of failure. And when the kettle whistled, it sounded like home again. The deed stayed in my drawer, still in my name. I dusted it once not out of sentiment, but because I intended to keep it clean. One morning, an envelope arrived. No return address. I opened it over the sink. Inside was a cashier's check, full repayment of the mortgage loan I'd acquired. David and Corinne's signature on the back. No note, no apology. I stared at it for a long while. Then I walked it into the office and filed it in the cabinet next to the closed folder labeled Granger Property. I didn't say a word about it to Evan. He didn't ask. The next weekend, he trimmed the hedges around the front gate, then fixed the hinges on the tool shed. He whistled while he worked. I found myself humming in the kitchen. The farm didn't get bigger. It didn't get shinier, but it felt fuller. And every time I stepped onto the porch with a mug in my hand, I felt something under my feet. Not power, not revenge. Roots. The kind that hold even when everything else tries to tear loose.